Welcome back, all my MMA fans. UFC 300. Was that the greatest card of all time? Let me know down in the comments. I'll get to my thoughts towards the end of the video, but wow. I'm sorry for not putting out a video yesterday. I was still high from those fights. That was one of the craziest nights of fights ever. Before we get into the breakdown today, I do want to just say thank you guys so much for watching the 300 predictions video. It was the best performing video on this channel so far. I think it got like 7,000 views and a ton of amazing comments. So thank you guys so much for that. Yeah, today we're going to break down 300. I want to start everywhere all at once, but let's start with the first fight of the night. Figueiredo versus Garbrandt. Now, going into this fight, we had predicted Figgy, but we also said that Cody was getting a bit old, and some people had some issues with that. I didn't mean so much like old as in age. 32 isn't quite that old. You're still in your prime, but he has put a lot of miles on with those championship fights with TJ and his chin, a lot of miles on that as well. And we kind of saw that in this fight. Figgy, it was pretty one-sided in the first round. Come the second round, it was just Cody had nothing for him, and Figgy looked tremendous. Figgy had one very, very close submission in round 2 that almost choked Cody out. Cody somehow escaped, which I thought was excellent, and then Figgy got him right back into a dangerous position and ended up choking him out in the second round. Now, I think Figgy is very, very dangerous at this weight class. I think him going up in weight is going to be a problem for 135. Him cutting down to 125, I don't know how he did it. That was insane to me. He looked like he was almost dying every time he cut weight. So I think that there's going to be a huge, huge problem now at 135 because Figgy, man, he's got everything. He's got striking, he's got kicks, he's got submissions, he's got very, very good grappling, as we saw in those Moreno fights. I think he's going to be a huge problem. I would love to see him fight Umar in the future. Getting on to the lightweight bout, the one that kind of upset all of us. We all kind of wanted Jim Miller to win this. He was on UFC 100, UFC 200, now UFC 300, and it was a great fight, but Bobby Green, yeah, he looked too good, man. He bloodied up Jim Miller. Jim Miller looked like an absolute warrior by the end of the fight with all that blood coming down. He had a cut like over and under his eye, which looked badass. But yeah, Bobby Green kind of upset all the fans, and that was too bad. I really, really wanted Jim Miller to win, but emo child Bobby Green won. So anyways, getting on to the women's strawweight fight, Andrade versus Rodriguez. Now, I don't want to comment too much on this fight because I wasn't actually watching it. I had a bunch of people over at my house, so during this fight, I was making burgers, making hot dogs, getting things ready for people. I'm sorry, Andrade and Rodriguez. This is the fight that I decided to skip on to make food for everybody. But I did see that Andrade ended up winning a split decision. So good for her. I think I bet on Rodriguez, or at least I predicted her to win. That didn't end up happening, but I did say in my prediction video that would be a very close fight, and indeed it was, being a split decision. The lightweight fight, I think this was the early prelims headliner. Turner versus Moicano. So going into this fight, me and Hunter really, really wanted Moicano to win. We just think that he's so much fun. He's awesome on the mic. He's super funny. And we both kind of thought, okay, Turner is just too good. He's got too much power. He's a very unorthodox striker. We think he's just going to knock Moicano out in the first round. And it was close to that happening. Turner actually knocked down Moicano and pretty much had him out, but he walked away, kind of like how Sean O'Malley wants that clean KO. And that was the downfall of Turner. Moicano eventually came back and knocked him out. So I was very, very excited to see that. I really like Renato Moicano, and I can't wait to see what he does next. I think he called out Paddy Pimblett. I think that was right, or maybe it was Bobby Green. It was one of the two, but anyways, I hope Paddy gets messed up in his next fight. Then we had a featherweight belt between Yusuf and Lopez. Going into this fight, I think me and Hunter both said that Yusuf is a bad MF and he is very dangerous, but we both wanted Lopez to win because this kid, he's just a fighter, man. He kind of reminds me of Max Holloway. He has that, fight anyone, anywhere, anytime mentality, and it showed in this fight. I was not expecting him to get a KO in the first round. I thought he was going to get maybe a late sub, if anything. But yeah, Lopez, absolutely tremendous performance. I can't wait to see what that kid does next. Then we had the women's bantamweight fight between Holly Holm and Kayla Harrison. Now, in my prediction video, I said that I wanted Holm to win because I've been a fan of her for so long. But I kind of knew that Kayla Harrison was going to walk away with this, and it was going to be pretty one-sided. There's a 9-year age difference. Kayla, I think, was 33, and Holm was 42. So for a 42-year-old to win an MMA fight is going to be difficult anyways, let alone going up against Kayla Harrison, who I think only has lost one fight in her career, and she's a two-time Olympic gold medal in judo. So yeah, Kayla's going to be a huge problem for this division. I think she pretty much stomps everybody until possibly, we got a little tweet that hinted at this, maybe Nunes will come back once Kayla wins the belt and we'll get that kind of super fight. I am very interested in that. I would side with Nunes just because of the striking and the experience, but man, that would be probably just as big, if not bigger, than Nunes versus Cyborg. I think that's the only fight that really makes sense to me now that Kayla's in the UFC, because Kayla's just going to starch everybody. It's just how it's going to go, unfortunately. At featherweight, we had Calvin Kattar versus Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain. Yeah, he looked amazing, man. He was like ragdolling Calvin Kattar at points in this fight. I think at one point he held him like completely upside down. Aljo looked amazing, man. Like, I don't know how he was cutting down to that weight anyways. I think he's going to be much, much better at featherweight, having a little bit more room to eat and to have that power. I think he's going to be a problem for most people. I don't know how he matches up against Ilya, to be honest, because Ilya's wrestling is so good. But I would really, really like to see Aljo versus Ortega next, to see really who has the best jiu-jitsu. I think that would be an excellent matchup. Both guys have pretty gritty striking too. So I think Aljo versus Ortega is the matchup that I want to see next. Sucks for Kattar. I really wanted him to win. I am a big fan of that guy, but he is that good. I'm not a fan of him, but he is that good. And then next up, our prelim headliner was Jiri versus Rakic. And going into this fight, me and Hunter thought Rakic. We think that he's probably the most talented striker in this division. And a lot of people didn't see that, probably because he's been injured so long and he hasn't had a ton of fights in the last 4 or 5 years, which is understandable. But going into this fight, the first round, Rakic looked really good. I actually thought that he was winning the fight until we got to that second round where Jiri, man, he's just so unorthodox. He's so weird. He hits you stuff from angles that you haven't seen before. And yeah, he eventually found Rakic's chin, which sucked. I thought Rakic actually looked really, really good in that fight up until that moment. And Jiri ended up getting a performance of the night for that, so he won $300K. I don't know if it should have went to him. I thought maybe Pereira, which we'll get to in a second, or maybe even Figgy should have gotten it because they had a little bit more of a clean performance. It was a little bit more dominant. But that was probably the second or third most exciting fight of the night. Rakic and Jiri was fireworks from the beginning. And I would like to see that one ran back, but I understand why they wouldn't want to do that. So we'll see what happens with Rakic in the future. I think Jiri versus Jamal is probably the next fight to make. I'd really, really like to see how that turns out. I'm just thinking probably Ankalaev versus Pereira's next, if Pereira stays at light heavyweight. We'll get to that in a second too. And then we had the middleweight fight that kicked off the main card that everybody was so upset about. My prediction actually didn't turn out. This fight did go to the second round. I was not expecting that. I thought that Bo Nickel would get Cody Brundage out of there in the first round, being a minus 2,100 favorite and just being how good he is. But he did struggle with a little bit of adversity. He says that, he really hit some adversity in this fight. I think it was a slight adversity. I think Cody was just stronger and tougher and a little bit more confident than Bo was prepared for. And that's why it took a little bit longer for Bo to find his neck. But Bo eventually, did find Cody's neck and choked him out in the second round. So there was a lot of talk after the fight in the press conference, Chimaev and Bo, and how does that play out down the line. I've been wanting that fight since the day Bo Nichols started MMA. I'm like, throw him in there with Chimaev right now. Like, I'm super confident in Bo, but that is like the fight, I think. Whether Chimaev wins the belt at middleweight first, or they do it for like an interim belt, or I don't know how the division will look around that time that they actually fight each other, but Chimaev versus Bo Nichols is a fight that I am looking forward to so much. I know it's probably a year or a couple years away, but I'm super, super excited for that when it eventually happens. Next up, we had the lightweight belt between Charles Oliveira and Arman Sarukian. Going into this, I was cheering for Arman. Something about him, man. He used to play hockey. I'm a huge hockey guy. His wrestling, I'm a huge wrestling fan. There's just something about Arman that I really, really like. That fight with Islam, I think that was Islam's closest fight. besides the fight that Islam lost. That was Islam's closest fight, and I really, really want to see that fight ran back. But in this fight was very, very close. I was not expecting it to be this close. I was actually thinking that Arman was going to knock him out in like the first or second round, but Charles made it a fight, man. Charles is a dog. I did say that in my video. You never know with Charles what you're going to get, and he made it close, man. He had some submissions that were very, very close. One in the first round and one at the very, very end of the fight in particular that were very, very close, and if it was anybody else, I think they would have went to sleep. But Arman he's a different breed, man. I'm really, really excited to see what he does in the lightweight division. And then we had the fight of the night. The performance of the night and fight of the night. Max Holloway, after this, walked away with $600,000, the most anybody's ever walked away with in bonuses. And this was fight of the year, I think. Honestly, after this fight ended, I was sitting there and I was looking at my cousin. I was watching with my cousin mostly, and he's not, the most in the fighting, so I was explaining a lot of stuff to him. And I told him right after that fight, I was like, I think that might be the best fight I've ever seen in my life. I think that that's probably on par, if not just under Rory and Robbie, because, this fight was amazing. It started out with Max kind of picking his shots, in the first round. He tends to start out a bit slower, and then he ramps up as the fight goes on. And Justin was landing these leg kicks that the commentary team was like, man, Max has got to watch out for those if those start adding up. And they were creating a pretty big welt on his leg, but it didn't affect Max at all. He didn't care one bit. He just kept walking forward, and he kept finding his shots, and he looked so accurate. He looked really, really good at 155. I thought his best performance before this was his performance against Dustin. I thought that Dustin Poirier, Max Holloway, the second fight was so razor close. It's one of my favorite fights of all time, definitely in my top 5. I thought Max, arguably won that. That was a very close fight. So I think this is the weight class for Max. He looked absolutely amazing. He was finding combos, and then, of course, those last 10, 15 seconds, he points to the mat, and if there's one guy that's going to oblige, it's Justin Gaethje, and they just threw down, throwing recklessly, and Max landed that shot with 1 second left and absolutely flatlines Justin Gaethje. Flatlines him. His head goes into the mat, and he's out for a bit, and Max, charges away, and that was a special moment, man. That, for me, that's that and the Jorge moment are just, they're different. They're just imprinted in my mind differently. And I know some people are saying that this is better than the Jorge moment. That one was crazy for me. I watched it in Florida, and just the 7 seconds, I was huge on Ben Askren being a wrestling guy and him being undefeated, and just the way that played out, it had the same aura to this Max Holloway moment, and it was spectacular. I mean, it sucked the life, like Dana White said, it sucked the life out of the building. It sucked the life out of my house, too. Everybody's like, man, we got 2 more title fights? Holy, we just watched that? Yeah, man, I love Max Holloway. After that performance, he is, 100% in my top 10, top 5 fighters of all time. Personal favorites. I've had so many great moments with him. And he's only 32. He's still got some time left. I don't know what else to say about that fight, man. That's the true definition of a BMF. Out of all the BMF fights that we've had, that was the most BMF moment. Man, I'm still high from it, and it's 2 days later. It was just such an awesome moment. That's what fighting's all about. Yeah. And then we had the women's fight, which I was also super pumped for, man. China versus China. I thought this fight was awesome. Jan got choked out completely unconscious at the end of the first round, woke up, and then somehow kept fighting. And the shots she was taking, the way she kept fighting back, man, Jan is a warrior. I was so impressed with her. I would give her the Darren Elkins Award for the night. She was so tough throughout that fight. And I think she won a round. I think she won the third round. But Weili looked amazing. To me, that was a GSP performance for Weili. She mixed in the takedowns when she needed to. She held on. She closed the gap. That was a true championship fight from Weili. I thought that fight was going to be a little bit closer, and Weili really pulled ahead. She gapped her in the moments where she needed to. And Jan, man, I can't wait to see what she does next. She's tough. I became a really, really big fan of Xiangyan, however you say her last name, after this fight. And then the light heavyweight title bout. This was kind of a meme fight. So this fight started. Pereira comes out, does his little bow and arrow celebration. Jamal's like taunting him to come in. The press conference, Jamal had the Easter Island head statue all beat up with like blood coming out of the nose, and he was taunting Pereira, and Pereira's like, man, you better watch yourself. So there was some bad blood for this one. This was the only fight of the night that had, some bad blood, and I do credit Hill. Thank you, Hill, for creating something there, because all the other fights were just like perfectly matched. Every fight from the bottom of the card to the top was just perfectly matched, but there wasn't like a ton of bad blood. There wasn't like a storyline. For this one, there was a little bit of a storyline, and I liked that. So they walk out. This fight gets started, and then there's that infamous moment. I mean, we've all seen it, right? Where Hill throws the nut shot. Pereira doesn't even look at Herb, just pushes him to the side. He's like, hold on, let me cook. And then bang, that left hook or uppercut or whatever it is. It's kind of an awkward punch. But he lands with the bottom two knuckles and just flatlines Hill. And then the way he was beating on his head like a drum too, that was violent. And then the celebration was iconic. I was not expecting that from Pereira, but I laughed my ass off. I think I was laughing for like 5 minutes after that. I could not believe that he did that to Hill. And Hill, being the guy he is, the TikTok dances, he's from Chicago, he's got that cocky kind of bravado attitude to him. I'm sure this is really getting under his skin right now. So, yeah, man. What an amazing night of fights. I think for me, personally, out of all the fight cards that I've watched, I think that this is either tied or it is number one. The reason why I think it's tied for number one is because in 2017, I think it was. I think that was the year. I watched UFC 217, where you had Joanna versus Rose, and that was when Rose upset Joanna. That was huge. You had TJ upsetting Cody, which was huge. And you had GSP coming back and beating Bisping to go up in weight and get a belt. So you had 3 championship fights, and all 3 champions lost. And that was... I watched that one at Wild Wing. I had like 10 buddies with me. Something about the atmosphere, something about the way the fights went down. That to me was a special night of fights, and I'm sure Hunter would agree with me. To me, that's still number one, but UFC 300 has to be tied or like just barely underneath it. It might even be over top of it, because that Max Holloway fight was the craziest thing I've ever seen. But yeah, I want to know what you guys thought. Let me know down in the comments. Where does this rank for you guys? What are your top 5 UFC cards of all time? If you can make a list like that, I would love to hear that from you guys. What was your favorite fight of the night? What was your favorite moment? I could probably guess that for a lot of people, but the Poton Pereira moment was... it wasn't as like badass, but it was so funny. I loved that. Yeah, let me know, guys, in the comments what you guys thought of this card. I will be doing a prediction video for UFC 301. That card I'm, less excited about. I actually don't even know who this Craig guy is. I don't think I've seen him fight before, so I'll have to go back and watch some of his fights before I do that prediction video. But yeah, I will have some more UFC content coming to you guys soon. Let me know in the comments what videos you guys want to see next. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Helps boost this channel and the algorithm. Thank you guys so much for watching. It means the world to me. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.